You are listening to The Strange Accounts. I am your host, Matthew Carmona. If you've had an experience and want to come onto the show, you can email me at thestrangeacctspodcast@gmail.com. Today's guest is going to be talking about how he got involved in witchcraft, his Dogman encounter, and this white-faced, red-hair, red-eye demon that had an evil smile. He would see this demon whenever he was in areas that had paranormal activity. Now, Quentin had other experiences throughout his life that we were not able to get into on this episode, but I will be having him come back on at a later date so that we can get into those. I hope you enjoy this episode, so please sit back, get comfortable, and let's get to Quentin. Quentin, correct? That's how you say your name?
That's right.
All right. So you got some experiences with some paranormal and some cryptids that you want to talk about, correct?
I do. Yeah, sure. My dad was big involved with that stuff back in the 70s. He was big as part of the, the new outgrowth of that kind of thinking and interest and stuff. He did a lot of, attempts at astral travel and things like that. And, he said, you always talk to me about materializing things and things like that. He had a book he gave me called The Magic Power of Witchcraft by Gavin and Yvonne Frost. It was a very old book, and he was just all about it. And, I kind of read it and took it with a grain of salt. I met a guy, became a good friend of mine over the years. We were just best friends for a long time, growing up as teenagers. And he had a similar interest. I mean, to this day, he'll walk the neighborhood at his house, at his area, and talk to the trees and make sure there's hedges of protection on things and things like that. So he's big into that. And at the time I was too. We got some older books. This was at a time where you couldn't just Google things. So I mean, we had to go to libraries and things and try to find interesting information. And at one point we decided we were going to attempt to. His name was Mark. And so, because the story will come back to him later, but at one point we did attempt like a conjuring. We were very interested in necromancy, so there were doors that were opened for me. And once you open the doors, there's just no real easy way to close them back up. So we did a summoning. We had a fire in the middle of circles that we'd taken from books and with sigils of protection. And we went the whole route. And we saw a bodily form begin to coalesce in the fire, and shoulders and a head came up, and it was corporeal, but it was not at the same time. So it was definitely something that scared us really bad, and we took off. We were kids, so we never closed that, and that was a big part of it, was closing what you started. And
where was that opened at?
That was in Florida, in Jacksonville, Florida.
In Florida. Okay, so that was near like your home at that time, or?
I was near his home across the city. It's a big city, so.
He had opened that door in his home.
Near his home.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we did it near his home in a clearing. But so fast forward from that, I remember my grandparents, they had a home that was down the street from their home. It started off in this small home. When my grandfather came back from Korea, his mother had bought him land. So he built a small home. And, then later, as they, progressed, they built a larger brick home down the street. That home became unused except by the two older boys. They were, working, and one of them was my dad. So, and his brother. So, little did they know, this was one of the largest Blackfoot Indian settlement areas in the past. This field and this place, they'd had this home. There was a burial mound at the edge of the field that was ripped open by Hurricane Hugo. And once they saw that with his skulls and the bodies and just the different remains that were there, and they had teams come in from, the colleges in the state. And so they did a big documentation of the area. And to this day, after a rain, you can go walk through and you'll find arrowheads in the field. I mean, it's just massive amounts of stuff. And he always said, of course, you got to get into the theory of the Carolina Bays as well, because this is in South Carolina. The Carolina Bays were just gouges, basically, during the Ice Age when giant glaciers moved across the face of the land. They left these really big gouges, and those later filled up with forests, and it was always easier to go around a big, deep gully. So these were pretty much left untapped, untouched. They were right in one of these bays, like on the edge of it, with this burial mound. So he would say oftentimes, hey, I can hear in the mornings very early, I hear drums, I hear chanting, I hear dancing. So, that was just always what you hear. You always heard weird stories from him anyway. So you always took it with a grain of salt. But years later, I went back to that house. I walked in there. It had been shut up for years. I mean, literally it was falling apart. And yes, I was walking on the floorboards and things like that. But, I got to this one bedroom and the door slammed in my face. I mean, it was, with venom, it was not some slow creak where the boards I'm stepping on are making a door closed. It was definitely with menace. So, but that, so I'm down the street, at my grandmother's house. Fast forward to, a few years later, I'm down the street at her house. They burn trash there. They don't have a garbage pickup. So, you have a big barrel at the edge of the field, and the way the house was set, there was a nice little yard, and then there was this massive field behind the house, just at least an acre of stuff that they would plant, or they would rent it out to people to plant. And this particular night, it was soybeans that were planted there. They were about knee high at the time. And, I was out burning trash. It was a little after dusk, maybe. And, I was looking at the field, and it was just dead quiet. Moon was out, but it was still it just turned. And, something stood up in the field. It just stood up, and it was on two legs, and it had a hunch, and it had a dog face, and it was probably about, maybe 50 to 75 feet away from me. Like it had been laying there in the soybeans waiting for it to get dark. Like sometimes you'll see deer do. But this just stood up, and I was mortified, of course, because there was something on two legs, and they were bowed legs like you'd see on the back of a dog. And it looked at me and then ran across the field, very fast towards the woods at the edge of the field. So that was my sighting of a Dogman there.
How big would you say it was?
It was probably at least 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall, maybe between there, 6.5. It was very big.
And like the color that you say, can you ring? I know it was like dark, so I don't know if you were able to see.
It was just dark. It was just like a dark color. I mean, but the big thing was, more than anything else, what made me be able to make it out was it turned its head. When it stood up, it looked straight ahead, which is down the rows. Okay. Not towards me. And when it did that, it put its nose up in the air like it was smelling, and I could see the silhouette. I could see the dog-shaped face and the hump that's on its back that you see in a lot of photos and stuff. I mean, and I didn't know what that was then. I mean, this was many years ago. So, I had no idea, but I knew that it wasn't right. And it looked right at me, and then it took off. And, so that was that encounter.
And how old were you at the time when that happened?
I was probably maybe 20.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. That I'd probably be scared beyond belief to see that dog, man. Like, and you said it was just laying in the field, and
right.
then it rose up, smelled the air, looked at you, and just didn't care about you, and just went along its way. Wow. That's
right. So, and then I had another incident that night. So, once I went to bed, it was a couple of hours, and I was awakened by something tapping on my window, a tapping sound. So I opened the window, and I opened the blind up, and it was, the best I can describe it, it was not the Dogman. It was something different. And I don't know if one had happened, would the other not have happened? I've asked myself that many times, but this is that area of doors being opened and craziness, and who knows what's out there. And it was, the best I can describe it, it was a ghoul. It was white. It was white as a sheet. It had sunken black eyes and almost a shapeless mouth and long, stringy black hair. This is not a window that would be easy to see into standing on the ground. It was a good 8 feet or so up. So I screamed. My grandfather came in the room. There was nothing there. So was it, I literally got up and went to the window. So, I don't think it was a sleep thing. I saw it. I saw its breath on the window. Cause at first I thought it was a mask of some kind or somebody was messing with me, but then I saw the breath and you could see the small movements of its face, the nostrils and so forth. And it's, gaping, like formless mouth. It was just bizarre. A big crazy day. And like I said, I don't know if one had happened, if the other wouldn't happen, but they went hand in hand that day. So,
right. Yeah. It makes me wonder if, since all that stuff that was going on in the house, if that was just part of it, or if that was another like you said, could that be a totally another different incident? Right. And you said it was white. Because at first I thought it was maybe of a rake. I don't know if you've heard of those.
That sounds familiar, but
it's white, but it's longy. But most of those, when people describe them, they're like crawling. They're normally, people normally say they're crawling like a spider. You said this was up at your window, like it would. You saw black hair, sunken eyes. Did you see any other parts of its body, or just
it was
just
so fleeting?
Just the face?
That's all I saw was the face and part of its head. But, I've seen 3 faces. Well, I've seen the Dogman. I've seen that. And then, down the road a bit from my grandparents, through one of these bays and around this other bay and, these bad areas, there's an old church and, it's ruins is what it is. And, you can go to it and it's pretty much fenced off nowadays, but, it was stopped during its construction, because, the, foreman, because it was built during slave times, the foreman was very, bad guy. He was always very cruel to the slaves. And, so he was working on the bell tower, which is still standing to this day. And, it's just an empty tube though at this point, but he was working up top and fell and landed on a pile of bricks at the bottom of the bell tower. And, they let him lay there and die because he was so cruel to them that they let him suffer until, for hours, screaming and in agony. So this place has gotten a good reputation for being, a little different. It was one of those places teens go to at night and dare each other to go there or turn off their car and things like that. But I went out there with a friend of mine, and he and I got out. We were just kind of fooling around, having fun. There's these little bushes beside the church. And these bushes are like calf high. They're not, no one could hide in the bushes. It's just scrub basically. And, I saw something move and I looked over and the bushes parted and a white face came out. This was a different face than the other one. This one had like fiery red hair and red eyes, and it grinned at me and turned its head to the side. And, like my brain is kind of processing this, like there should be a larger person behind this, or this is not just a face in the bushes. There should be more. These bushes aren't big enough for this to hide this thing. What is this? My brain's going crazy. So I screamed out and we got out of there. We're pulling out of there. And as we pull back to go forward, I see literally a monkey sitting beside the road looking at me. And, it's like a little rhesus monkey you'd see on someone with a carousel or something like that. But, it was sure enough sitting there. And, so we got out of there. And that was just unnerving. My wife and I went there later, and we'd heard a woman scream in the woods. It's just a crazy place. And if people want details as to where to go, we can talk about that later on. I could do that. I don't want to flood it with people going to this historic site.
No. I mean, if you just give like kind of the state where it was at, that's it. You don't have to give out two details. As to like
those
that.
are in South Carolina.
Okay.
So then, I said my friend Mark would come back in the story. Years later, I'm like probably 26, 27. He asked me to come back I went back to Florida on a visit. He asked me to come with him because he suspected that this area in the woods near him had some satanic activity. Because, like I said, he's always trying to do protections and looking out for things. And I said, well, okay. He wanted me to come with him. So I was humoring him, basically. We went back in these woods, and he was full of suspicions all the time. He was just that was him. If you had a black car with red trim, you might have thought you were doing the devil's work. So, I mean, he was almost paranoid about it. So I was humoring him. I went out there. We walked back in the woods. We came to a clearing. It was almost like they planted bamboo and almost weaved together this little room in the middle of the woods. Whoever had done this, because it's like walking up on a wall in the woods, but it was foliage. I mean, we got in there. There was a tree stump that had lots of candles and stains, and we were unnerved by that. And but we thought still there's no direct evidence of anything happening. But then we found like a bag of clothes, and it was all children's clothes. And typically, if you see a bag of kids' clothes, it's going to be someone's giving away. I'm going to give these kids' clothes away. I'm going to they looked like they'd been discarded, because they weren't needed anymore. And who would do that in the middle of the woods? So that freaked us out. We started getting out of there pretty quick because we didn't know who was going to come. And I heard something behind me, and I turned around, and that same face from that church came through the bushes, the white face with the red eyes, the red hair, and he did that little grin. And my brain was not believing it until he turned his head sideways with that little grin again, and it all clicked in. It was the same face from hundreds of miles away. And my friend saw it too. Mark saw it too. So maybe at some point you can get him on there, but because he's had quite a few experiences as well. So, but yeah, those are the gists of it. I mean, there's been smaller incidents, but once you open the doors, it's going to be a wild ride, and you never know when it's going to come. You never know what mundane thing you're going to be doing, that you're going to get that feeling on the back of your neck that something's not right, and you're not by yourself anymore, or there's an extra something here with us, and things change. You can feel the temperature of the room change. You can feel it. So that's been the extent of my times where I've seen things. I don't know if anybody else has similar experiences, but I've heard the Dogman talked about. I've never heard anyone mention the guy with the white face and red eyes. I've never heard the ghoul really mentioned or seen anything online that looks similar to it. But there's definitely a way to make the veil thinner. And once you do that, I mean, there's times of the year when it's very thin, but once you do that, like I said, you don't know where it's going to manifest itself or in what regard. So that makes it really dangerous.
So the face, let's talk about that for a minute. So the white face, red eyes, and that's popped out twice for you, and the bushes, and now behind you. There was no other body attached to it. There was just the face. Just the face, both times. Right. Well, that's crazy. And you said on the first time you saw a little monkey?
There was a monkey beside the road when we left after seeing the face. And, I heard a few weeks later that someone had possibly shot a monkey in that area. Okay. But I don't know that for sure. But right. It's, again, would I have seen the monkey if I hadn't seen the face? Would I have seen the face? Would I've seen... Why would the white face, then the small little monkey, and then that's I almost think of it like it's if I see something, I'm always going to be first skeptical of what I've seen. Right. This is not I'm seeing something wrong. I'm seeing something different. I'm seeing something for pareidolia or something like that. But then it's almost like their second thing will happen to let me know, no, that was real. Here's a little punctuation mark at the end of the sentence, You saw something.
And then your friend saw it too as well, to validate
yes, he saw the
that
face as well.
the white face, red eyes. And did you say it had red hair too?
That's right. It was crazy red hair that was
I think you're the first person that I know of, or even through my listening to other podcasts and listening to other paranormal stuff, that I've ever heard of the white face, red eyes, and red hair.
Yeah. This is some kind of entity that has taken personal interest in what I'm doing, I guess.
So when you say what you're doing, you talk about like the stuff that you have done in your past,
right?
Like when you and you said Mark is your friend, correct? Or that was your okay. So I might after the show I might get with you and see if we can get Mark's information, or just at least get his email maybe, and go from there to see if he wants to come on and talk about some of his experiences. But so you open these doors because of Mark. Mark's the one that had the interest in.
Well, we fed off each other. I had a healthy interest in it too because of my dad and things he was saying to me as growing up and things like that. So
in the book that I gave you, is that it's witchcraft? Is it more towards like I'm trying to think of the word of Wiccans? Is it more that side because of the nature?
More commercial. Yeah. Like it was more like prosperity Wiccan. So it's like you can manifest anything if you just put your mind to it.
And when you think about it, I think that is a lot going on. If you look into anything YouTube and you type in manifesting, you get everything from people teaching you how. Because I had looked at it, curiosity of astral projecting, and I had looked at that like people talk about opening your third eye and meditating, and I was trying to do some of that because when I was younger, I used to have sleep paralysis, and that used to frighten me. And I used to never know what it meant or why I did it. I just remember I'd wake up, but I couldn't move, and I could look around the room, but I didn't see anything. But I could scream and yell, nothing would happen. And then I would eventually come out of it, and then I would jump up and run around the room, but that's only happened a few times in my life. But when I looked into this meditating of how to opening your third eye and trying to astral project, I got close to putting myself in a sleep paralysis, and I stopped. I was like, nope, not doing it. So I understand now when you talk about like people wanting to, if you put your mind to it, you can manifest anything. So
well, you were thinning the veil. That's what you were doing.
See, and that's where go ahead. I was
going to say that's the problem. I mean, what if you do it wrong? What if you lose your connection? What if your silver cord gets cut while you're out and about?
Right. See, that was kind of thing that I looked up. I started listening to some of those other, let's say, people coming on and confessing, saying, hey, it's not all fun and it's not all just rainbows and everything's happy. They're like, if you're not in the right mindset, you can manifest things that when you go into astral projection, it's not good. You're going to meet things that you're not prepared for. And a lot of people that I was looking into talking about don't do it, we're talking about the horrible bad experiences that they had when they tried to astral project. So they're talking about like clearing your mind and make sure that you're doing it right. And I just like, I'm just going to avoid that because my luck, I would see something traumatizing or I would, as you say, thin the veil or open a portal or something, or open something that now is coming into my house and now affecting my family and loved ones. And now, so I stopped there, but it's powerful what the mind can do.
Well, I don't think people realize that, in this physical world, there are predators and there are prey. And that for some reason, they don't believe that applies to other realms. Everywhere you go, there's predators. And no matter how much protection you have, there's apex predators. So there's things you don't even know about. And you don't even know what's true and what's not true. I mean, I was involved for many years with the Church of Scientology. That was something that was just you get to a point where you say, wow, I don't believe this anymore. And then or a fact they're presenting to you can't just be taken on its face. I mean, there's just too much. And, people don't understand that when you do that, when you open that up, you learn things you don't want to learn. It's like one of those things. Could you call and a phone number and find out when you die? Sure. But would you,
right.
Don't go towards the light because it's a trick.
Right.
You hear that. You don't want to hear that.
No, you don't want to hear that. And now I don't know too much about Scientology, about that. Just for me and the listeners that, let's say, who haven't done any of the research into that, just give a little brief description of what Scientology involves.
Oh, well, basically it was, invented by a science fiction writer in 1950, I think it was. He wrote Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health. He took a lot of psychiatric phrases and turned them around and used different wording and so forth. And basically just began to build a series of courses where you could make yourself, a better person. But it quickly degenerated into, basically before he even started, he told friends of his, hey, what's the fastest way to get rich? Start your own religion. And that's what he did. And there's a lot of things that are just untenable in it. I mean, I read a dozen books and listened to thousands of hours of lectures, and it got to a point where they mentioned a third invasion fleet. And I was like, what is this? This is some type of a invasion fleet back when the pyramids were being built. It gave them instructions and helped them out. And that was enough for me, to say, okay, this is a science fiction writer. And I'm just glad it didn't take more, and people are in this thing for years. They don't want to quit because they've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, there's just no galactic overlord that's been imprisoned, that's going to one day get free and try to enslave Earth. It's just, stuff they save up for those levels you get to where you'd be just embarrassed not to continue. And part of it is letting them know what your secrets are. They go through these sessions where you unburden yourself by telling someone your secrets. And, that's why I think a lot of Hollywood people are still involved with it, because they know things about them when they were just getting in that would embarrass them if they came out. So
told secrets and open skeletons to the closets, and right. Showed the skeletons in their closets, and that makes sense now. That kind of gives me a little idea, because I knew a little bit, but I didn't really look into it too much. So I appreciate you giving me. And
that's a very, very brief description.
Just a little brief discussion.
Just enough to really make Scientologists angry. So,
but when you start digging into something like that, and you start finding out like you said, the farther you go, the deeper you go. The more that is revealed to you. And people say that about the Freemasons, or people say that about, even for the Catholic religion. The more what does the Pope know? So
more than us.
And more than that any of us will ever get access to, or be allowed to actually look at some of the books, or look at stuff that was taken out, or stuff like that. Right. So,
well, if you just boil down to the fact where you have a Pope Emeritus, a retired Pope living on the grounds of the Vatican, so that he can, escape persecution in Geneva or prosecution in Geneva for crimes. I mean, come on. So, if you just start with the surface issues, they got some problems.
Oh yeah, definitely. My wife's Catholic, and when you start digging more into the church, and you start, just alone with pedophilia is enough to be like, to stop anybody from going, you got your own issues, buddy, before you start telling me what I got to do. Right.
And besides, that last Pope, he looked just like Palpatine. I mean, why did nobody see that?
When people I've looked at that, I've seen some photos online, man, where people have made some comparison. I was like, what? Wait, was I blind when that was like that? What? And then you start looking, and I'm like, yes, people made some crazy comparisons to the last Pope, and then just seeing their faces and his eyes sunk, and they're like, yeah, he's possessed. And then you're like, what? And you start looking into that, and you're like, I don't know. I wasn't around him, so I don't know what his mannerisms were.
Yeah. I mean, it goes everywhere. I mean, look at the video of, Kenneth Copeland talking to some lady about his private jets. And Just look at his eyes. Just look at his eyes. It's unbelievable. How deep they go. He's made some deals to get where he's at.
Right. And when that's like you said, you want to talk about people not wanting to think about, there being predators, not just in this reality or not in this dimension, but in others, in the spirit world. Yeah. I mean, like you said, do I want to call somebody on the other side and ask what it's like? No, I don't know. I don't think I'm ready for that. I don't think I'm mentally prepared to be like, hey, what's it like? I mean, I am fascinated by some of the people that have near-death experiences, and they tell their experiences, and some have fascinating accounts, and some have ones that aren't, that are just like, that's terrifying. So,
it's not that you may encounter something bad if you do things that open doors. It's when you will, because it's like, imagine being in a submarine and it springs a leak. How powerful that water is coming in. All that water is trying to do is trying to get in there as fast as it can and equalize that pressure. And it's unstoppable almost, because it's such a powerful force. That water is always going to try to get into that submarine, no matter how tight it is. That's what it is when you go into the other realms. Is the predators are always trying to get in. They are always like that water, just doing anything they can. And there's not just one. It's thousands and thousands just looking for any doorway, any type of foothold. So you always have to keep that in mind whenever you're doing things that will thin that veil. So
with your experiences of thinning the veil, what do you do as protection wise to prevent somebody, like if someone decides to venture down this path of thinning the veil and opening?
Well, at this point, it would be, whatever you feel like is going to make protections for you, whether that's prayers or whether that's, oils or tinctures or sigils you draw. If you go back to, basics, it's like whatever is most powerful for you is going to be the most powerful. Not necessarily for that person or the other person, but whatever in your mind is powerful. But then again, we're going to your mind, and what will or won't be respected it's just a crapshoot. It's nothing. There's nothing you can do to stop. If something is really tenacious, really wanting a foothold, you go to a haunted house or a place that's allegedly haunted. You're coming home and things are feeling different on your way home because something came along for the ride with you. Something came home from the place. And you say, well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that's true. Well, you don't have to, because they believe it. And you're believing it a little bit because you wouldn't be there if you didn't.
And now that you say that, I've never thought of it like that. Because my wife she loves haunted houses. So, yeah, now that you say that, you're right. That always when you come back, right? If you go into a legit place that has some type of bad entity or bad karma or bad energy, you do feel different on your way back. Because I think, like, for example, we went to Dominican Republic. No, it wasn't Dominican Republic. Take it back. It was we went on a cruise, and we were in Jamaica. We went to a haunted house where a witch had been, and she was buried outside, not inside. When she died, she was back doing the plantation years. So she was very cruel to the slaves. She had mistresses that were of the slaves, and apparently one of the slaves got jealous and found her with another one and killed her. But she was a witch. So when you visit that, they have her, what they say, she's buried outside, and they show the casket because they perform spells, and there's markings on that casket. And, like you said, was bad energy there? Yeah. Now that I think about it, when we left, I did feel weird, different coming back. I was like, that was interesting, but not as great as everybody made it into a tour, Oh, come by and visit this, When you think about it, if the stories are true, and that's where her body is, there's got to be, you talk about, you don't know what portal she opened up or what thinning of the veil she did and what she invited into that home that we walked through, because they talk about stuff still moving. So
just by being there, you're feeding it. Just by showing up and giving it attention, and all the other people that do on that tour, they're feeding it and feeding and feeding and feeding. They're sustaining this thing. So, it's like Ed and Lorraine Warren, they would take items and put them in their home in a special place so they would no longer be fed. Because if you have a doll that's frightening you and you feed it by talking about it and showing people and continue, you're feeding it. Your reaction is going to be worse, whether it's psychological or paranormal. Your reaction is going to be different each time something happens. And you're going to notice things. You're going to ascribe things you wouldn't have before to the activities of this item or person or spirit. You're feeding it definitely by even being there. And of course, you're going to, by it's taking something from you, it's going to be more than happy to give you something in return.
Wow. Yeah, you have given me a lot to think about, like what I thought I understood about me being Christian, and my faith, to think about it like that. Like you said, like they're out there, and whether or not you want to believe it or not, because a lot of people don't. They're like, nah, I don't believe in that. They don't have to worry about you. They're out there, whether you believe it or not. They out there, and they're looking for anybody to attach. And if you don't believe in them, they don't care. They're just still going to attach and go wherever they need to go.
People are so impressionable that you can have someone who straight up will tell you, hey, they'll tell a person, I don't believe in, magic or witchcraft or spells. And they say, okay, well, I'm going to put a bad luck curse on you, and it's going to start tomorrow. Guess what? That person, even though they don't believe in it, guess what they're going to start doing with everything that goes wrong? They're going to start attributing it. And before too long, you're going to have a believer, and as a Christian, you're going to have a believer in whatever that they said they didn't believe in, because all this bad luck's happening. But as a Christian, I'm sure you've heard it said before, even the devil believes in Jesus. So,
yes.
When you're in an exorcism, they wouldn't say the power of Christ compels you to a creature that did not give that any power.
When you say that, just that alone, I talked to a lady that had what she gave him a name. I'm not going to say the name because because I didn't really go into it when it was like during the end of the interview. She had brought it up. It's like one of my last ones. She had brought it up, and he's more of an unwanted guest. He started appearing up in their life, came from another place, she said, and he talks to her, and she knows that it's not her. He talks in her husband's voice, but it's not her husband's voice, is what she told me. She's like, and he talks to him, her husband, and her voice, but it's not her voice. It's different, but it's like it's trying to mimic them, and it tries to whisper certain things. She said in their house, and she said things would go missing, just up and missing, and then they have to tell it out loud, bring it back, and whatever item was missing would show back up. And
if it's to the mimic stage already, then she's in a lot of danger.
Yes, and this is what I told her, because she talked about it, doing to the point of caressing her. And I said, I'm going to stop you right there. And I said, I'm just going to give you you don't have to take it, but I'm going to give you some advice. I said, you need to get the house blessed. I said, because you have an entity attached to you, an item or something into your house, and to the point that now it's touching you. It's caressing you, and it's talking to you. I said, they just keep going. From what I've looked into, I said, they just keep progressing and progressing and progressing to the point to where most of the time it's either somebody getting violated or they possessing that person.
Mm-hmm. Intimacy will lead to violence with these things.
And that's what I was trying to tell her. I said, you need to get the house. I said, I don't know if your faith is Christian, then you need to get the house saged and blessed. I said, but if you do sage, you do it on your own water. I said, the power of Jesus Christ, it works. I said, and what I've seen to notice is that if you're going to say, I compel you in the name of Jesus Christ, leave, you need to use the words leave and go back to whence you came. Go back to where you came from. Because if you just tell them to leave, they're just going to they could just go outside the house and be hanging outside the house. You need to make sure that you leave, it leaves. I said, if I were you, I'd get the house blessed. And I'd be looking for any items that you brought into your house that when this thing started. Because I have some stories from my family. That's what they did. I believe an entity attached itself to an item that they brought from another home that they were renting, or possibly they were trying to buy that home, but they took some of the person that had passed items into this new home. And all I'm going to tell you is when they brought that into the home, they started having things happen. And to the point that I told them, did you bring any of that man's home? They didn't believe in that. But I told them, I said, did you bring any of that person's belongings? I know the widow said you could take some of his things, but did you actually do that? And they were like, yes, we did. I said, you don't go throw those out right now. Throw those out right now. And when they did, everything subsided. So,
Well, like any good person, I'm a big hypocrite myself because I took a piece of the brick from the church right where the guy landed. So, so talk about something that could be attached. I could not take it. So
right, and maybe, do you think that's what that white face is with the
could be
with the eye? Is because now you have this item that now that's something to think. I didn't think about that when you said that.
And another thing with what you said before with the be sure you say this part of it for it to leave and go back. We all heard for the entity to leave and go someplace else. You had to tell it where to go. That's a good point. Is whenever you do something like that, you need to have a very set structure. And remember, we always used to hear that nursery rhyme that said, "Rain, rain, go away, come again another day. Little Susie wants to play." Right. So she's addressing the problem, the rain. She wants it to do what? Go away. Mm-hmm. She's giving it a reason because she wants to play. And she's telling it what to do with itself. Come again another day. So that little nursery rhyme is actually a pattern for the exact things you need to have in a working like that. You need to be forceful. You have all those things in mind. What you want, what you wanted to do, what the reason is, and what the result you wanted to be is. So that was a good point there.
Yeah, because I'm not going to lie. When she brought it up, it was like out of the blue. And I immediately, in my own head, I kind of stepped off and I said my own little prayer. I was like, protect this house. I'm praying. I'm like, Jesus, please, put a hedge around this house and home because I don't want that entity coming through. Because I asked her, I said, are you still having issues? And she says, yes. Today we had an issue. I'm like, So this person is here, could be here in the room while you're listening, because we actually were having some technical difficulties with getting her to come on. She, we were having issues with her trying to log into the program. I had to use another program that used the phone, but the quality wasn't as good. And we had when I went back and listened, there was a lot of popping, a lot of static, a lot of distortions of sounds. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, because I've had other guests come on. Like I had a person from UK come on, and his quality was good.
You should listen to her call. Listen to for EVPs in her call.
Okay.
Maybe there's some in the background, but EVPs are one thing. But when does something mimic? That's different than an EVP. Where else do we hear about things being mimicked? In the woods. With the legends of the skinwalkers and things like that. They're going to mimic people or yourself. They're going to call out your name. That's the only other place you hear that. And that's never good. So
right. And that's what I was trying to get her to know. When she started opening up a little bit more and started telling me a little bit more details about what he was, this entity, she gave it a name. I didn't go into, did he give you his name? Or is this what you're calling it? Because I told her, I said, let's save that for another interview. Let's save that. Let's just start off with just what you've had, because she didn't tell me that. That was kind of like a bombshell dropped on the end. Was like, hey, by the way, I have the spirit that is here, and it's doing things. And I was like, this ain't good. I was like, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. I started off the air. I'm like, this ain't gonna be good. I said, you need to get the house blessed, like now. I said,
one of the
because
fundamental laws is there's power in the names. There's power in the name of Jesus. There's power in the name of God. There's power everywhere. I mean, there's power and so much power in names that the Hebrews wouldn't even say the name of God. They would always wouldn't even write it because there's so much power in the name. And every time she calls the spirit by its name that it's given her or she's given it, it's just feeding and feeding and feeding. It's just growing more and more powerful.
And that's the thing. She, it's just like he came out of nowhere. She said he came from another home and he came to her. I was like, see, this ain't good. I said, ma'am, this ain't good. I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. I said, you need to get the house blessed. She goes, well, my husband's not for that. I said, let me tell you something. I said, it doesn't matter. I said, that's going to be up to you. But if I were you and you're telling me he's already spooning you and you know it's not your husband and your husband's not there and it's trying to mimic your husband, I said, no. I said, because I feel like, I'm going to be honest with you. I said, I feel like this is going to escalate. I feel like he went from talking, now he's touching. I said, you don't know where he's going to go. It could be violent. It could be its next thing. It could be maybe trying to possess you or your husband. I said, I don't know what you got. And I was like, I'll be honest with you. I said, I fear for you right now, talking to you, that you need to get this done like ASAP.
Right. You are right.
But yeah, so it's been some interesting stories, interesting interviews already. Like I said, one of my first interviews is a good friend of mine, and he's from Tonga. So over there with them, that's normal. Possessions.
Oh yeah,
witchcraft is normal. He says when he was his family would tell him stories from Tonga, and he said they would tell him, yeah, this is normal. He said, and when he would talk to his parents, but his family members about this, they'd be like, yeah, it's like it was every day.
Oh yeah,
everyday life, like it's nothing. Yeah. So yeah,
I just read a story from there. It was either Tonga or Congo where they had arrested a goat because someone said that as a guy he'd stolen a car. He's a wizard or a witch, and he'd stolen a car, but then when they almost caught him, he turned into a goat. And so police were holding him to see if he turned back into a guy.
Wow.
And that was this year. So.
Okay. Yeah, I have to look into that. That's crazy. That's wow. So witnesses said that's your guy.
Right.
But he's a goat. He's disguising himself.
And the police are like, because it's so prevalent, they're like, yeah, he's not probably the guy, but let's take a look. Let's hold on to him a minute and see what happens. Why not?
Let's just throw a goat into the jail cell and we're gonna hold him.
That's right.
And see if he turns back. I don't know, but to them, to even think about, like, if you try to do that today, if you try to say that goat committed a crime, I'm telling you right now, they're gonna put you. They're gonna call a mental health person out, or the officer's gonna take you in and put you in a hospital and get you emergency detention. He's be like, this person needs psychiatric help. They believe a goat committed a crime.
Yeah.
But over there, like you said, they believe that, just like over in Tonga, where it's everyday life. Like, oh yeah, possessions, spirits, ghosts, see it all the time. That's probably true. And for them to accept that and go, yeah, he might turn back. Let's see.
Yeah. So, I just remembered, like, back when I saw the Dogman, and I told my grandparents what I'd seen, and they thought I was crazy or whatever. But, I told my dad about it, and he said that he remembered when he was a boy, which would have been in the 60s.
Okay.
And he remembered someone shooting a big wolf and shooting his paw off. And then someone in the community, like the next day, was missing a hand. They'd said they'd had caught in some type of machinery or something. And he said, so that was what my story reminded him of, was that story back when he was a kid about somebody shooting a big wolf and then a neighbor coming up with a missing hand. So I don't know about that, but I don't have any other details. But
that kind of makes me draw more towards a skinwalker. for it to, because you hear
it might
that.
have been the same entity I saw twice.
See, and that's the thing. Like, if it's a skinwalker, then that means, it's a person doing witchcraft.
Right.
And for them to shoot the paw, and then now all of a sudden a neighbor or a fellow, member of the community is now missing a hand, a limb. So, I mean, it could be coincidence, or it could be, like you said, interesting. And like you said, we're not there to even talk, to talk to that person or talk to any more witnesses in that area. But that is fascinating. So both of your family, both you and your dad have had experiences with.
Well, he just had the story about it from his childhood.
From his childhood, it was told. But even, to even think about it, even back then, for them to even talk about that, right. Most people would have been worse than they are today if you told them.
Yeah, they were suspicious. They weren't putting anything past anybody. These are people that would, they're going to put, salt around their windows and just why not? I'm going to bury a jar full of my urine and nails, so that I stop evil spirits, as a spirit catcher. Why not just go ahead and bury one? It's probably bullcrap, but my mom did it. Her mom did it.
And if you'd have told them if you'd have told them go get sulfur and put it around the house,
right?
And after it rains, keep doing it. That's the type of people that have been like, you know what? I don't know why we do it, but I'm gonna do it. Right. I'm gonna keep doing it because everything's working good right now, and I ain't trying to bring in nothing.
That's right.
So, wow, sir, you've had some fascinating accounts. You have kept me on the edge of my seat. Just, I have really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Oh, yeah. So, I've enjoyed talking to you, too. It's great.
I appreciate it. So, all right, sir. I think that's going to do it for tonight.
Okay. Well, if you ever want to pick my brain again, just feel free to drop me a line. And, I'm just getting warmed up. When I get going, I'll talk for a long time. So.
All right, folks, that's about wraps up this week's episode. Again, if you've had an experience and want to come onto the show, you can email me at thestrangeacctspodcast@gmail.com. I'll also post the new episode on a YouTube channel called Strange Accounts Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment on what you thought of this week's episode. Now, if you are listening to the show on another podcast platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I appreciate it if you would leave a 5-star review and comment, as this will help the show grow and reach new listeners. So please like and share this podcast with friends and family. Thank you for listening, and have a good night.